Good morning, AVI CHAI speaking. Hi. So that's great.
Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar. We're just going to wait another few minutes for more people to join. So in about a minute we'll get started. Hi everybody, welcome to the webinar. What story does your school tell about its Jewish purpose? We're going to get started in 1 minute. I'm just going to hit the record button so that we'll be able to watch this later. Okay. Hi, you're watching the webinar, What Story Does Your School Tell About Its Jewish Purpose? It's my pleasure to now introduce Dr. Jack Wertheimer, who's the project director of How Schools Enact Their Jewish Missions, 20 Case Studies of Jewish Day Schools. Dr. Wertheimer?
It's my pleasure to moderate this session. Background is a project that was conducted under the auspices of the AVI CHAI Foundation. And the purpose of that project was to focus very sharply on the Jewish mission of day schools. A great deal of attention, understandably, has been devoted in recent years to all kinds of financial questions, sustainability questions, and the like. They remain at the front and center in the minds of many in the day school world. But there's a whole other set of issues that are also quite important around mission. In order to get at some of those questions, the AVI CHAI Foundation sponsored a project that I was privileged to direct, which culminated in 20 case studies that examined the ways in which different day schools representing the entire spectrum of the day school world address some of those challenges to its Jewish mission. Broader questions such as bringing schools and their stakeholders into alignment, focusing on perhaps narrower that address how schools strengthen tefillah, how they strengthen the teaching of Hebrew, how they address Israel. There are a range of these case studies, as I said, 20 in all. All of those case studies are available online at the AVI CHAI website, and we will be emailing you the precise URL link to that, but it's at avichai.org and under areas/case studies. This afternoon, at least for those of us on the East Coast, it's noon already, we're privileged to have with us two heads of schools that were included in this project. Nicole Nash is the head of the Chana Senesh School, a K-8 school located in the borough of Brooklyn, New York. And our second speaker is Rabbi Tuli Hartstock, who is the head of school, in fact, the founding head of school of the SAR High School. Both of them are going to be addressing questions that pertain to the issue of how they and their schools speak about and communicate the Jewish purpose of their schools. Each of them will speak for roughly 10 to 12 minutes, and after that I will be happy to field questions that those of you who are observing this webinar can text to us. I'll communicate those to our speakers, and I hope that we'll be able to have a good exchange based upon that. And with that, I'm very happy to ask Nicole Nash to lead off.
Hi. I thought it would be just to give a little background about the Chana Senesh School, and thank you so much for hosting conversations around such an important topic. The Chana Senesh Community Day School is a kindergarten to 8th grade school located in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn, so in the downtown area of Brooklyn, and we have 200 students and are 20 years old. We are a very diverse community, 16% Israeli, 10% Russian. We have families where one parent is Jewish, one parent is not. We have some modern Orthodox families, a large number of conservative families, those that would identify themselves as traditional egalitarian, Reform, and many who might say we're just Jewish. So we certainly are a diverse group with what we consider to be a very important Jewish mission and Jewish purpose. At Chana Senesh, we talk a lot about what is our Jewish purpose, and it's an interesting time for this webinar. While for the last 8 months at our school we've been going through a strategic plan where this conversation of who we are, our identity, and Jewish purpose has come up with parents, amongst the strategic plan committee, the board, staff, so a very timely and an important conversation. At Senesh, we think about our Jewish purpose is to create a nurturing and respectful, open and inclusive Jewish community. We certainly have a shared values, a shared history, and a collective commitment to these. But it certainly is a place that is very diverse with different perspectives and different beliefs and different places where people hold. We think a lot about our work as an educational institution as a place where we are creating experiences for our students and for our families. We want, over the 9-year period, while students are at Chana Senesh, for those students and their families to be creating their own Jewish narrative. I like to view families and students that they're on a Jewish journey. Their time at Chana Senesh is just one part of that journey. And our role is to really be there to support that journey, not to have an idea about what that end result specifically will look like, and it will look very different for every family in this school, but to really be creating those experiences and supporting that process. There's certainly in our Jewish mission an openness to dialogue, We want to develop students and families that are comfortable with the complexity of Jewish life, yet at the same time also know enough and have had enough of their own experiences to engage meaningfully. So that's a little bit about the school and what we see as our Jewish mission and purpose. And then become the much different and big questions of how do we articulate this, in particular to our parents, but also to those in the community, prospective parents, donors, many people. In terms of articulation, we think about it in terms of families when they're thinking about coming to Chana Senesh. Is there an opportunity for them to really get to know the school and for them to understand who we are? Because we certainly don't want somebody to come here under any false pretenses. So we are very intentional that every family that's interested in the school does go on a personal tour with the admissions director. And that is just a time to open up the dialogue, the communication, see the school in action. We tend to see that parents feel comfortable as a part of that process, opening up and talking a little bit about what drew them to look at Senesh. Where are they? What makes them really want to be a part of this community? What might be something that's a barrier or standing in their way? And we find that that is a really great opportunity to really articulate a bit about the Jewish mission of the school. Another place where we really articulate, I think, who we are Jewishly is across the multiple platforms that we use. The website, our publications for not just admissions, but our annual review. How do we choose what articles are in there? What do we want to highlight? I can think of an example that last year in our annual review, we had a parent, a Russian parent who does not belong to a synagogue, had her son's bar mitzvah at school. And it was, a very moving experience. It was a family that had moved from Russia, never thought that they would see the time where someone in their family could feel so comfortable in their Jewish skin and feel so proud and outward about it. And we chose to have that parent write a reflection of what was what does Chana Senesh mean to them and to their family Jewishly. So I think we're very intentional in terms of what we post on our Facebook pages to really try and show families who we are. And I think it's not just about sharing those experiences, it's also about taking the time to articulate some of what goes into making those decisions. The teachers, in another platform, our teachers communicate regularly with their parents in their classroom. Teachers have a weekly blog, and these are both email and the blogs are a real opportunity for teachers to share what's happening in their classroom. Why are they doing what they're doing, and how does it really, again, reflect the Jewish mission of the school? One additional platform, which is actually at the heart of what our case study was about, was the creation of a Small City at Senesh program, where we have taken our school's Jewish mission and developed a program where we can bring what we're doing at Senesh to the greater community. By opening up our doors on Sundays, we have an open play space and holiday programming, again, that is articulating our Jewish mission. We are bringing together in a very open and inclusive, non-judgmental way members of the community, not day school families or students, but other members of the community who are searching and are looking for a place to explore and be on their own Jewish journey. So those are just some of the platforms where we articulate our Jewish mission. I do want to say I think it's very challenging, and part of what we learned in our strategic plan thus far this year over the last 8 months was that it's an area we want to be better at as a school. I don't think that you're ever at a place where the work is done. I think it's about constantly reflecting and keeping the dialogue continuing. And I know a goal for us now is going to be to really go back and look through all parts of our identity and make sure that we're doing as good a job as we can of articulating who we are and what's behind all of the decisions and curricular and policies and the experiences that we create for our students and our families. When I was thinking about how do we communicate the mission to our parents, the first thing that really came to mind was through hearing it and seeing it and living it. We're a very experiential school, and when I think about school events, whether they're the extensive social action programming we do, or our whole school Tekasim assemblies, our whole school holiday celebrations, so many of these school events are driven by our Jewish mission. I mean, we are so driven by Jewish values as being at the core of helping us to create the lens that we want our students and families to see the world, and to have these Jewish values not just be how we see the world, but then how do we choose to act in the world. And when we have a social action program where every class in the school is connected to an organization in the community and a parent association that develops family opportunities for social action, right there is really at the core of how we feel like we communicate our Jewish mission to our families. It's an opportunity for them to not just know what it is, but to experience and to really to live that. Another area where I feel like the Jewish mission and Jewish purpose of our school really comes through is through the classroom. Our teachers every day are making decisions about curriculum and what the students are going to do. When I think about the Tefillah program in this school, it very much speaks to our Jewish mission. In a Yun Tefillah, where we're spending time talking about prayers and what do they mean to you and what values do we learn from them. I think it's very much about who we are and who we are as a school Jewishly, and that we have conversations about what prayer might look like in different synagogues, that it might look different depending on where you go, and what those differences are. I think being really open to that type of dialogue, which comes through in all of the classrooms and curricular choices, is essential, to really focus on and articulate out to parents. A few different things come to mind. We have a bar bat mitzvah program in our school, and the parents understand that when you're in 6th grade and you're in the bar bat mitzvah class, it's an opportunity for the school to understand your family, and everybody's bar bat mitzvah is not going to look the same. We have families that belong to a synagogue, we have families at Sennish that do not belong to a synagogue, and we are open and we work with each family to understand and support them into what that experience will look like for their family. And I think that when all of the kids are seeing these different bar bat mitzvahs and knowing about these different conversations, that's at the heart of Chana Sennish.
Nicole, this is a great place, I think, to ask you to conclude your comments. We're going to circle back because you've raised some very interesting points here, and there will be opportunities to go into some of these other areas as well. I want to remind those of you who are watching this webinar that you do have an opportunity to pose questions to both of our speakers. There is a box either below the screen where we appear, or in my case it's off to the side, where you can type in questions that then will be sent my way, and will be posed to Nicole and to Tuli, because we want to have close to a half hour in which there can be some back and forth between these questions and our two presenters. With that, I'd like to invite Tuli Hartstock to speak. His school, as I mentioned before, is a high school, so it's different already on that level. It's also a high school within the modern Orthodox world, so a very different kind of high school than the community community school rather that Nicole has described. Please, Rabbi Hartstock.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you. It's a really wonderful opportunity, a privilege to be able to spend time with you today, this afternoon. I thought that I would also start with a little bit of background just to situate the high school with some a little bit of data. The SAR High School is actually built off of SAR Academy. SAR Academy is now in its 47th year, and it was made from 3 schools in the Bronx. The high school is now in its 12th year. So the high school is built off of a rich tradition that the Academy had already put in place. We now have 535 kids. It is a demographic. It comes from Westchester County, Manhattan, New Jersey. It's not totally a local school, but kids coming from lots of different communities. They make up the population of the school. And the constituency, it is a modern Orthodox school, and that very much shaped what the school is about and the mission of the school. I thought that I would focus particularly on the mission statement of the school, a little bit of how that came to be and the way that it lives within our school environment now. One of the most frightening things and also most exciting is the opportunity to be able to start a school from scratch where there are no kids or teachers, and you hope that you're going to have to figure it out enough that people will actually show up. And I had one of the most impactful exchanges that I had before the school started was spending a long-distance chavruta with Dan Pekarsky, as professor of education in Wisconsin. And he pushed very strongly for the idea of having a mission statement that was going to be a live document shaping life in the school. And we knew that our population was a modern Orthodox. We were going to serve the modern Orthodox community, and it felt that, for me, the most important thing is that Orthodox. There were basically two missions that grew out of SAR Academy. I had to be faithful to that, and also figure out what that meant on a high school level. And they were learning. There's a learning vision, which has to do with creating an environment which is warm and nurturing and creative, where kids can actively be involved in creating an environment of trust and respect of kids. There was also a Jewish mission where Orthodoxy would be confident enough to take on the challenges of the world in a really strong way. And for us, the question was, what does that look like on a high school level? And so I found it was a very rewarding process, actually, to sit and have an exchange of ideas around how to put words to those kind of abstractions. And after doing it bechavruta with a professor, we did our first hirings. We actually had a group of 4 people that spent a number of days in a room. It was a number of days in a room trying to concretize what are the there are lots of things that are important to us, but if we could only pick a few and figure out how to say it in concise enough words, you know, that was the first time that I tried something like that. It was very rewarding, and it was remarkable how long it took to put together one of our 4, which are now 5 bullet points that we have in our mission statement, which I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. What resulted from that process was a 4-bullet mission statement, 2 of which were learning goals and 2 of which were Jewish goals. And our focus, I think, today is on the Jewish mission of the school. What has become, it is interesting also to see which of those bullet points took off and which we struggle with to actually give voice to in the life of the school. So on the Jewish side, we have one sentence which talks about probing the world with humility and openness to God's creations, which had something to do with having a certain disposition towards learning. We had a much harder time, we still have a hard time actually concretizing that in the life of the school. The second one is the idea of a grand conversation between Torah and the world. And for us, the way that we kind of talk to that idea is that there are many, we wanted to kind of describe how somebody could be very rooted in Jewish texts and learning and practice and not necessarily have a sense of how to bring those to the world within which he or she is living. And there are many people who can live in the world very successfully and be Jewish, but not know how to kind of bring that, not have the resources of what Jewish life offers, and to be able to bring those ideas together. For us, what was most important is that in this Orthodox community that sometimes swings between being closed off from the world and other times, you know, there's kind of a sliding scale. We felt that we wanted to make a strong statement of our belief in being deeply rooted in Torah text and practice and language, and being totally embracing the fact that we live in the world within which we live, and then figure out how can we make connections, almost like make the languages talk to each other and be able to communicate that to our students and faculty. One of the things that was, you know, when we talk now to our mission statement, we will talk about it as being both descriptive and aspirational. As we'll say that the idea of this document is something that hopefully describes lots of things that happen in the school, but being able to teach a community of kids and then hopefully extend that to their parents of how to live like what we see to be something of a tightrope, being strongly committed and open, and being a thinking person but also a loyal person. How to manage those things is very challenging. And so we say all the time, we think that this mission statement describes lots of what's in the school, but we see it as an aspirational document. And for us, we look at the statements there and say, where do those things live in the school, and are there other places where they can live in the school as well? In terms of communicating that to our constituents, so everybody, their first engagement in the school, the first day of in-service for new faculty, and the first day of in-service even when they were faculty they were returning, the new faculty much more intensively, and for returning faculty more briefly, is an exercise around the mission statement to make sure that that's language that's fresh in everyone's minds and the way that the school functions. When we do a 9th grade orientation, the mission statement is one of the first activities that we do, and we study it as we would study any piece of literature or Jewish text. We do that to say, well, what would this look like in the life of a school? And that becomes right away part of the language the kids use in the school as well. I also would like to point that at a certain, about 5 or 6 years in, we felt that there was something that was an aspect of life in the school that was not addressed in our mission statement. And we had, we could talk about it later, but just to point to the way that the mission statement lives in the life of the school, we actually had a kind of a constitutional convention in the life of the school where we talked about, you know, certain aspects of mitzvah observance, or the challenge of having a co-educational, halachically observant community, and what that means, things that were not necessarily reflected in the mission statement. We don't do it very often, and did it once in 12 years, to add a 5th bullet point. And I'd like, in that brief 30 seconds, kind of convey what I think was at the time kind of a big event in the life of the school. And frankly, when kids get into that kind of conversation, it's very gratifying. And actually, when they make fun of the mission statement on Purim, it's also very gratifying. It basically means that it's in their lingo, it's part of what they're doing. Now, as far as parents go, one of the challenges that we find, which is very significant, is there's a kind of a circuit of, there are a natural set of choices for our constituents, meaning the kids who are coming to our school, for the most part, know that they're attending a modern Orthodox high school. They might be choosing between a co-ed school and a separate gender school. They might be deciding which neighborhood they're going to attend to go to for high school, but they know that they're going to go to one of these kinds of schools. And that shapes recruitment in a significant kind of way, actually makes it kind of a competitive enterprise. The reason why that's significant here is that in many respects, people come to SAR because it's kind of a market type of setting where they see different schools that are emphasizing different types of things. And our emphasis on what it means to be modern Orthodox, which is, for some, they appreciate the orthodoxy, and for some, they appreciate the openness of this particular kind of orthodoxy, and that's what's going to draw them. I'll take 30 seconds and then I'll end. What becomes challenging is that we find that for some parents, the last two bullet points, which are the Jewish, specifically Jewish mission, parts of the mission, what draws certain families. For others, it's the first two much more, which means we have a challenging curriculum, responsive to individual needs of kids, and we actually do very well in college admissions and things like that. And the Jewish balance is one that they feel comfortable with. They're not necessarily motivated by that, but they feel comfortable with it. So for some, in our parent population, the Jewish mission of the school is what appeals to them, and that's what brings them. And similarly, although on an 8th, 9th grade level for kids in certain respects, but for many, it's simply the kind of visceral balance of what it means to be Jewish and modern and Orthodox in this kind of way, but primarily driven by being a high-quality education. And that creates some, makes it a complex challenge. And one of the challenges that we feel we have to take on and haven't is how to embark on some kind of parent education that is not class-oriented, but really teaching towards the mission in a more profound way. I guess I'll stop with that for now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So actually, I want to pick up on one aspect of what both of you really have raised. Much of your presentations talked about the internal work that's been done within the schools to define your Jewish mission and to communicate that Jewish mission. But we all know that schools are dynamic places, and there are all kinds of voices that are heard in schools, whether the voices of students or the voices of parents or of board members. And essentially what I want to pose to both of you is the question about pushback. To what extent have you encountered in your schools pushback from any of those stakeholders? I'll repeat, either students or parents or board members. And I think what might be then most interesting for those who are watching this webinar to hear about is how you, meaning individually as well as the school, have responded to that pushback. Would either of you care to jump in?
Sure. It certainly happens at Senish. There are parents who will say that the school is too Jewish, and there are parents who would think that what we're doing is not Jewish enough. There's a constant push and pull, and I think at some point during your time at the day school, everybody has that moment of feeling uncomfortable about something. And I've found that open communication is actually the best thing that we can do, because in our school, part of being a community day school inherently will cause some discomfort, because everybody's not doing the same thing. So everybody's going to have those moments of feeling like this doesn't fit perfectly with me. So I have parents who, tefillah might be an area of discomfort for them. And I think that, an example, we have a kippah policy in our school that everybody covers their head, whether it's a boy or a girl, for tefillah. And we have families who just are not comfortable with the idea of wearing a kippah at all. And we have modern Orthodox families or other traditional families that don't feel comfortable with their girl wearing a kippah. And I started to have a lot of conversations with parents about this. And we now have a policy where it says in our handbook, if there's a concern, this is why we have this policy, and if you have a concern and it doesn't feel right with your family, please come talk to us. And we want to listen and we want to understand, and we want to make changes. The whole purpose of this school is to have the diversity, but yet to have everybody feel comfortable. I mean, that doesn't mean that everything a parent wants is going to happen, but I do think that parents need to be heard, and the conversations and the dialogues for understanding need to happen. And I do think that they shape the future of the school and future decisions.
Okay.
For us, certainly, it's always interesting because obviously the pushback also comes in both directions. Some people thinking it's the Jewish side is too much, and some people thinking that it's not enough. I think in our setting, the more vocal, those who are thinking that the Jewish mission is too present. So, for example, they'll say there are too many hours of Talmud studied each week. It's kind of it's a relatively silent complaint as when I compare it to the other side. I think that because it's a modern Orthodox school and there's a certain set of expectations, there's a little bit there will be grumbling, but it's a quieter grumbling, I'd say, than what happens in the other direction, which is when the school makes decisions that can create a concern that we're not towing the Orthodox line enough, and that becomes creates an anxiety for some. I would agree that for me, letter writing has become a very important vehicle. Conversations are very important as well, but they're so singular, and it helps, but sometimes you're only speaking to the people who actually are coming out to talk to you, etc. And I find that crafting a communication which says this is what we believe and explaining where it is that it comes from and what the ideas and the sources are behind it is very helpful to people. I think that the best that I hope for is that people can respect that the positions that we've arrived at are arrived at with integrity and with lots of thought, and there's a willingness to say, I could have done this one a little bit differently. Over the course of time, I think that those become those kinds of pieces that say, everyone. I feel like we have a community where people understand what the mission of the school is, understand how sometimes that balance can be difficult, and also appreciate being communicated with clearly in terms of what the process was and how you got there.
Well, I want to just underscore something that each of you basically has acknowledged in your remarks, and that is that you're both living, working rather, your schools are located in environments where there are other day schools, and therefore that means that parents have choices, and that means that the school perhaps may be freer to hew to a particular mission, knowing that, well, if it doesn't fit these parents, they will find a different day school. Rumor has it that there are a number of day schools in yeshivot in the borough of Brooklyn. Rumor has it also that there are other high schools in the catchment area that the SAR high school addresses, and you've spoken to that point, in fact, Tuli. I want to pose some questions that have actually come in from some of our listeners, watchers, observers. I'm not sure what the right term to use here is. So one question for you, Tuli, and then another one for you, Nicole. Tuli, can you contemplate, I'm reading now, can you contemplate a scenario, due perhaps to generational issues or zeitgeist, that a mission statement could be changed? For example, pressure for a diminished role for Ivrit Be'Ivrit. And for Nicole, there is a question as well, and that is the focus here is on how to communicate what is done at the school, but what are the kinds of issues you would prefer not to broach at your school? Or are there such issues that you would prefer not to broach at your school? Those are the questions that have come in. Perhaps, Tuli, would you go first in this case?
Yeah, I think I certainly believe that it is possible that times can change and a mission statement can change. I think that it's the mission statement is there's a hierarchy of values. There are lots of things that we consider important in the school, and they don't necessarily make it into the mission statement. And then there are things that are in the mission statement, some of which are more kind of essential to the definition of the school, and some that are kind of part of a broader, image of what it means to educate kids today. So, before we actually had what I call that constitutional convention and changed some terminology and added a bullet point, I probably would have been less. It wasn't as clear to me, but going through that process, it became quite clear to me that part of the mission statement being a living document, for the most part, it's got to feel like it's secure and stable and what's really driving what's happening in the school, so it doesn't happen every day. But sometimes, sometimes it can be something that's important enough. I know that for us, as an example, we put our mission statement didn't say that we were a co-educational school, because it was so obvious that we didn't put it in. At a certain point, we said, at that point, we said, actually, one of our biggest challenges is how do we create this kind of co-educational, modern Orthodox, halachic? There's so many kind of stereotypes of what a co-ed school is, as opposed to, in our circles, a separate gender school. That was a significant part of our challenge, and so we changed the language to reflect that. On the other hand, I know that we could never decide to not be a co-ed school. That's part of, the board that started the school believes in that strongly. That's not negotiable. So I feel like it's a little bit of a sliding scale, but one that you deal with great seriousness before you tamper with it.
Thank you. Nicole?
Can you clarify what the question was for me?
As I understand it, the questioner who poses Nicole was asking whether there are certain types of issues that you try to steer clear from, precisely because your school is a pluralistic one, meaning that there are diverse families, or is everything up for discussion?
That's a good question. I think it's interesting, as we've been going through this process of the strategic plan. What became clear that what we weren't willing to have the conversation about was that we're a Jewish school, and there are certain bottom lines that come with that. Having tefillah every day is not something that we were willing to have a conversation about. Studying Chumash, the core parts of our Judaics program. We do have a serious program, and what was not up for conversation was altering that. What we are asking ourselves as the bigger question is, can we look at our mission statement, our Jewish mission, and make sure we are really doing all parts of that program, really living to the mission?
Okay, thank you. So to put both of you a little bit more on the spot now, could you think of an example? A crisis arose in the school. Crisis may be too strong a word, but certainly a controversy arose in the school that was specifically related to its Jewish mission, that some issue came to the fore, and that required addressing in light of. And if you can think of such an example, how did you go about resolving that particular issue?
I talk about tefillin? Is that?
That's what happened. That's what went through my mind. But this is your call.
Yeah, that's the most obvious one. Just the background on that story was that we had been thinking about how to create a davening environment. We basically set up our tefillah program where different grades daven in large groups, and we wanted to offer some kind of variety. We had done a few experiments with a meditation tefillah, an explanatory tefillah, a singing tefillah, etc. And we had settled on after experimenting a little bit with 5 or 6 alternate tefillot, one of which was a women's tefillah, and the idea was encouraging kids to figure out, in the same way that some like Karl Bach tefillot and some like the main minyan, etc., what actually moves you. 2 students, 2 women who had been putting on tefillin, and in our school the girls do not put on tefillin, came and said, would it be okay for us to put on tefillin, given that we do that every day, and we've been doing that at home before we come to school. Without going through all of the process, I gave them permission to do that in the context of the women's tefillah, and that was picked up and internally first, actually, because our internal community talked about it, and that became a topic of conversation for about kind of 10 days or so of process. And then about 6 weeks later, it got picked up by newspapers, and then it became a much larger process. There were 2 kind of rounds of how to manage that. The truth is that what's interesting about that is that it became a different level of management internally also after it became something that was out there on, in the newspapers. And I think what was most significant there was, I mean, for sure there were, for me, it was very important to meet with the people for whom this was most troublesome. Again, to speak internally for a moment, I went to spoke with each grade one at a time and explained to them what the halachic rationale of it was and what was philosophically, educationally behind it, and messages that I wanted them to take from it. And I also met with parents who really wanted to talk. As I said before, I basically articulated my position in a letter that I sent out to families, which was again picked up and sent all around. And for me, it was important to be able to articulate things that I believe in strongly. Number 1 is our responsibility to be committed to halakha. Number 2 is to recognize individual needs and where different kids were at, and the ability to respect practices and halacha at the same time. And at the end of the day, I think that believing in what I believed in and articulating it very clearly, it allowed people to think I was, for some to find tremendous, to be very supportive, and for others to really struggle with it a lot, but to at least respect the thinking and the process behind it internally. What goes on beyond those walls in the community, in the news, was very different internally than it was in the papers out there, because internally there was a sense of, okay, I mean, I don't agree, but I hear it, and that that felt right.
Great, thank you. Nicole, can you think of an example of such a flashpoint, let's call it, within the school?
I think that I'm going to speak about Israel. I think that this past summer, I don't necessarily want to call it a crisis, but I do think that we had a point where we, as a school, our 8th graders go on a 2-week trip to Israel. They're there right now. We teach about Israel. Israel is so much a part of our curriculum and who we are. And at the same time, based on this very diverse community we have parents and students that hold on a very large spectrum about what's happening in Israel politically. And when it comes to talking about current events in Israel, it can be very challenging. It's such a sensitive, loaded issue in our school that we found that we were actually shying away from it, because how can you be respectful to everybody? And I spent a lot of time this summer working with the staff and with the board around this issue, and came out with a letter to the community that we understand that people are holding in different places, but as a school, we support the state of Israel, and more importantly, as educators, it's our responsibility to make sure we are creating the time and space for our students to learn and dialogue with each other, and that we assured them we would do it in a very sensitive way, but that they needed to be aware that in our school, we were going to allow sort of the freedom of expression on both sides to come into the classroom and to help facilitate conversations with our students. And it actually, the letter, what I found was communicating to parents what we were going to do and a rationale about why we were doing it alleviated so much of the concern from parents. I found that parents on all sides were so pleased with the communication, pleased that we were going to take this on, and really felt appreciative of where we were going with it. And it's not over, and it's certainly not easy. But it's something that we are committed to working on.
Good. Thank you. So to both of you, and that has to do with the role of your boards. And specifically, my question is, does the board in your school play a role in shaping, helping to define, helping to think through the Jewish mission of the school? Or is that something that the board does not occupy itself with?
Yeah,
you want to jump in first?
At SAR, the board, there's a tremendous trust. The way that it's been organized is that the board has a tremendous trust in the people whom they choose to lead the school, both in the academy level and the high school, and they have very strong. They look to hire. I'm saying this just historically. Look at the school, hire people that they feel that that understand what the school is about, in a way in which they can then step back and be supportive of the administration in that regard, and also be, there's a very strong mutual respect where when things need to be raised, we have a good judgment to know when it's important to raise something with the board before doing it. But the principle upon which everything rests is we trust the administration to make those decisions, not because we don't care. We care a lot. We think you know what it is that we're after, and we trust you to do it. It surprises me that it's functioned that way and functioned so well, but it's actually, in my mind, a great blessing. That's the way that it operates.
I think that many of your colleagues in other schools might be quite jealous. Nicole?
Yeah, no, at Senish, I'm also very blessed to have a board and a strong relationship between the school administration and the board of trustees, and understanding, I think, the roles and the jobs, and being there to support each other in our work. And I think that does go both ways. When it comes to, I think, the mission of a school, I think the board, is charged with being responsible for setting a school mission. I think it is the work of the staff and the administration to ensure that the program lives the mission. So I would say that it's a real collaboration that the board does have a role in with setting the mission of the school. And as a school that's now in the process of the final stages now of redoing our school mission statement, I think it was an incredibly healthy process that involved all constituents. We really allowed the staff to be involved in feedback on the mission, and our parent body, and alumni families, and the board. And so I feel like everybody's voice was a part of it. But I do think at the end of the day, the approving of setting a mission of a school lies with the board, and ensuring its implementation or that it's being lived appropriately is the staff.
Right. Right. So to jump to one other very important constituency that both of you have, and you've touched upon this in your earlier remark, but I want to zero in specifically on students. How well do you think that the students in your school understand what the Jewish purpose is of your school, Now, I realize you're dealing with different age populations, so to be more on the fair side to you, Nicole, I'd zero in on middle school students rather than kindergarten students or first grade students. But how well do you think that they understand, and how is it that they've internalized what the Jewish mission of the school is? You want to go first on this one, Nicole? Or you want to?
Sure. I think it's some of my proudest moments are when I hear our alumni, speak about their experience at Saanich after the fact, and the value of being in that Jewish community. I really do believe our students, even in the lower school, really do understand our Jewish mission. I think when the kids are younger, they understand it in a different way. They're having play dates and going to people's houses and learning and really experiencing like who keeps kosher and who doesn't and what they need to do so their friend can come over. And in the middle school, they're in Chumash classes, really in a place where students are questioning, and it's this open environment where the dialogue it really exists, and watching them go to bar and bat mitzvahs in completely different types of synagogues or even non-synagogue settings. I think they really feel unified, but I think they really understand that what we're doing here is unique.
Great.
Yeah, I would say that if you would ask me if whether students appreciate the mission of the school, I'd give very high marks for that. I think that they appreciate the mission. They have some sense of what it's driving at, and I think that they carry some form of it with them after they're out of the school, and sometimes when they're moving on to their next the next stage in life are missing it and want to come back for some of it. If you can ask me, though, what they internalize and how they understand it, I think it's a much more challenging question. I think that they, because it is about striking a balance, and because it is about holding on to being open and loyal, doing things that are sometimes very hard to figure out how to balance exactly right. It is open to kids doing that or internalizing that in different ways. So from my vantage point, I feel like I believe in the mission strongly. I think that the student body appreciates the mission a lot. A little bit I have this feeling of I want to have an open environment as long as the conclusions they draw are exactly the ones that I think they should. And that's not such a good idea. And so that I think there's differences in terms of how and what is internalized.
Right. So I'm watching the clock, and there's actually one last question I would ask each of you, but probably only have about a minute for each of you to respond to it. And that is, as you think back to the beginning of your headship of the school, does something jump out at you as having changed over the course of the years that you've been the school head when it comes to the Jewish mission of the school? Or has it remained primarily fixed? Is there some area where you've had to do some adaptation, in other words?
I feel like like what's happened over the course of time is that it's become much more localized in some respect. As before we started, we were talking in big, large ideas, and now certain specifics become much kind of rise to the top in terms of where. So I've mentioned a few times here what it's like for boys and girls to interact with each other in a co-ed halachic school. That's like a certain manifestation. It's something that's on the table a lot more. Or certain aspects of how to be, how do you teach autonomy and independence, but a commitment to halacha in terms of certain practices. So I would say that what's happened is that the larger ideas have become much more local in terms of how to think about what you're actually struggling with.
Great. Great. Got about 1 more minute, Nicole. Any thoughts that you want to share in that regard?
I would just say I think the shifts that we have made is that we've allowed ourselves to be really open to feedback and reflection, and taking the time to really, we've done extensive surveys with our parents, and to really understand who are our constituents, who is our community, and are we really doing what we say we're doing? And I think those can be really challenging questions, and I think that is what drives some of the shifts and changes in what we do.
Terrific. Good. Well, first of all, on behalf of all of our observers of this webinar and of the AVI CHAI Foundation and myself, I want to thank both of you for very rich not only presentations but also discussions of some really important issues. What I didn't get a chance to convey to you is that we did receive a number of comments in which we were thanked for raising these types of questions, which are very important to others who work in the day school world. As a reminder, there is a case study that was written about the Hanasenesh School by Alex Thompson and Pearl Mattinson, and a case study that was written of the SAR High School by Michael Berger and Ruven Greenwald. Both of them appear in the collection of 20 case studies that are online at the AVI CHAI website, so you can learn more about these two very interesting and important day schools. Thanks so much to both of you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Pleasure.
Yeah.